All right, in this video, I'm going to try to explain some reasoning behind why A&P is so hard, because we get that as a comment all the time in both the lecture and the lab. It's a difficult course. In fact, it is such a difficult course that at one point somebody asked on Reddit, what's the most difficult course you ever took? And this was one of the top responses to that question. Here's what I want to point out, that we see a lot. There are a lot of people that are already working as EMTs, LVNs, and they're trying to progress their education, and they're having to take A&P again, even though they had already taken it years ago. And they sit there and they think, well, I've already done this before. I'm going to be just fine. And then they're not. And it's because A&P is not what a lot of people remember anymore. Now, that said, here's what I kind of want to come into. There are a lot of people who think this course is being taught at a level that is too difficult. I took a sophomore level A&P class, and I took upper level anatomy and physiology courses. What I am going to teach you is not the upper level anatomy and physiology courses. I have taken it down to the sophomore level. That said, it is still very difficult. So I'm not going to make you know the name of every hole in the skull, but you do have to know the name of every bone in the skull and some of the important landmarks that you have in the skull. I'm going to make you know the name of all the muscles, but not the origin, insertion, and innervation. So I'm not going to make you go into as much detail as apparently some schools make you do, because I know this is just a sophomore level class. But it's still going to go into more detail than you think that it should go into. So sort of what I'm saying here is it could be worse. It's not as bad as it could have been. Okay. One of the reasons that A&P is so difficult to learn is that, like I say on this slide, it's like you're learning a language, Greek and Latin, and you're learning science and things all at the same time. And that makes it very difficult to learn, unlike a lot of the other classes that are out there. If you've taken medical terminology before, that's going to really help you in this class, because you can start to break words down. Like if you don't know what fibromyalgia is before you come into this class, well, fibro means connective tissue with fibers. Myalgia means your nerves are hurting, essentially. So this means your connective tissue and your nerves are starting to hurt off over there. You can break it down because you know what those roots are supposed to be. I've seen students do that on a test. For example, just this past semester, I had a question on a test about what is preeclampsia. This student didn't know what preeclampsia was, so she tried to break it down. And she said, well, pre means before, and cia means something about the blood. And so she sort of kind of got some of the stuff right, and she earned some points just because she knew what those things meant. She didn't get all the points, though, because she clearly didn't know what preeclampsia was. Now, one of the other questions that we get asked in both lecture and lab is, do I need to spell things correctly? And absolutely you need to spell things correctly. One of the things that nurses, medics, EMTs have to do is patient charting. I want you to imagine that you have a patient chart and it is filled with spelling errors. And then you get sued for malpractice and your chart is filled with spelling errors. How do you think that's going to go over in court? It's not going to go well if you can't spell any of the words correctly. So we're making you learn the spelling now so that you can do it right, and then have exemplary charts later on so that you've got a good legal record to show that you took care of the patient like you were supposed to, or at least it's as good as we can make it because you could spell things correctly. I do actually hear students all the time saying just that big G word. Like I heard a student outside the hallway waiting to go in to take their first practical. Second practical, I guess it was. And as they were sitting there studying, somebody asked her, what's the name of a calf muscle? And she says, oh, it's that big G one in the calf. Look at all the big G words that exist down here. Which one of those is it? Which one of these words are you going to write down? Because the calf muscle is that big G word. Hint, or actually I'll flat out tell you, it's the gastrocnemius. This is the tongue and the throat. This is in the kidney. And all of these are about glucose metabolism. And so know how to spell it, know what the words mean. Those Latin and Greek roots, they can really help you out here. Here's an example that your book gives you on why spelling matters. There's one letter of difference between these two words, and yet one of them means this big old muscle in the back, and one of them means this tiny little bone in the wrist. Which is which? I'll pause for a second, and you can try to guess, 50-50 shot. Which one of those two words do you think is this muscle? If you go to a gym, they usually just call them the traps. It's the trapezius is the muscle. The trapezium is this carpal bone that anchors the thumb right off over here. So yeah, you got to spell things correctly. Now here's another reason why it seems like we're really mean. If you're trying to be a nurse, this story is particularly relevant to you. This woman, her name is Redonda Vaught. Several years ago, because of a mistake, Redonda Vaught killed a person while she was at work. She was just sort of the on-call nurse. She was not assigned patient. She was just filling a need, and they could say, hey, we need you to go do this, or we need you to go do this. And at one point, somebody said, hey, Redonda, we need you to go get us some Versed for a patient. Well, Versed, if you don't know what it is, it's a sedative. The patient was going in for a scan. They wanted to give the patient the sedative so they could stay nice and still during the scan, and then they would get a nice clear image. Well, Redonda went to the dispenser for meds, which it's an automated machine in her hospital. You type in the letters, you enter a code. If it's one of the drugs that is a protected drug, like a class 1 drug, you have to put in an additional safety code. Vecuronium is one of those drugs that should have had an additional safety code, but the hospital hadn't programmed the machine correctly at this point, so she typed in VE, and then she just assumed the VE was going to be the Versed that she wanted. And here's another problem with that, was my understanding. Versed is a brand name, and everything is in the dispenser as the generic, so she should have known not to type in VE because that's the brand name for something. But anyway, she typed it in, she hit Vecuronium by accident, and then she went and gave this patient Vecuronium. Vecuronium is a paralytic, which means stops your muscles from contracting. And if you know anything about AMP, I'm hoping you at least know you need to contract muscles to breathe. And so when we give a person Vecuronium, they better be on a ventilator because they can't breathe for themselves if you give them that. And so this patient got Vecuronium, they put him into the scanner, they stopped breathing, and they tried to resuscitate this person, and they could not. So this patient literally died because the nurse just typed in VE and then gave the patient the meds because she wasn't really paying attention. The issue there is, most of the time, nurses are running short-staffed. They are running from place to place. They don't necessarily have time to really pay attention to what they're doing, and yet because she didn't have time, she killed a person. Now, one of the other reasons that this case is really interesting is the moment that she heard that there was a person coding in the scanning room, she knew exactly what had happened, and she told people, I killed this person, I gave them the wrong drug, but the hospital covered it up. So even though this patient died literally years ago at this point, it's only just now, she only just lost her nursing license within this past month, and she is still going to trial because the hospital covered it up. Sort of the moral to the story here is the hospital is not going to protect you if you mess up, so don't mess up. The other issue that goes along with this is most of the time if you mess up, it's a medical malpractice suit. Your malpractice insurance will kick in. It will cover whatever it's supposed to cover. Depending on how bad you screwed up, you may or may not lose your license, which she did lose her license. Most of the time that's where it stops though. And for some reason, in the area where Redonda Vaught lives, the prosecutor is actually bringing criminal charges against her. And so not only did she lose her job and her license, she could go to jail for up to 10 years because she just typed in VE and assumed it was going to be Versed, and it wasn't. So I tell you all of that because would you rather make a mistake like Redonda Vaught and kill a person and have to go through everything she's going through, or would you rather make a mistake in my class where the worst thing that happens is you fail an assignment or you fail the class? And I think pretty much everybody watching this video is going to say, oh, I'd totally rather fail the class. So it's not that we're being mean. We're trying to prepare you for a real world that is mean and will make you pay prices you might not be ready to try to pay. And so, yeah, you got to spell things correctly. And yeah, you got to actually write out the whole entire word and not abbreviate unless it's an approved abbreviation, which that's where medical terminology will come back into play. So all of that really scary stuff is to tell you there's a reason that it seems like we're mean sometimes. And it's not because we're just evil people in here, you know, plotting your demise. It's we're trying to prepare you for a future. That said, this is totally doable. I took AMP as my first class right in college, and I did okay. You can do okay too. You're just going to have to work at it. I give you as much as I possibly can to help you do well in this class. I give you a series of notes. You can fill in those notes using the book. There's 2 reasons that's helpful for you. One, I put on the slide. There have been numerous studies that show that you writing material down helps you remember it better. And so that's point 1. Point 2 is I'm not expecting you to memorize every single thing that the book has to say, because that book goes into way more detail than it needs to in some cases. So my notes also tell you what I think is important in a specific chapter, and all of my tests come off of my notes. And so if you fill those out, you're helping yourself in a bunch of different ways. 2, complete all of the assignments. They are there for a couple of reasons. 1, they help you study the material because, oh, I have something I need to do, I better go ahead and read that chapter. 2, they help show you what kind of questions I might ask you on tests, because you might see some of those same questions on tests a little bit later on. You can look at those assignments like they are sort of practice tests, and you can see how much you actually know. But what I would recommend that you do with the assignments is use your books, use your notes. If you want to get together in groups so you can talk through the questions, I'm perfectly okay with that on the assignments. The assignments are your chance to get to know the material better and to help you study that material so that you will remember it when you come to the test, because you cannot use your books or your notes on the test, and you cannot use your friends and your group members to help you out with anything on the test. I do also, however, want to say that a lot of the assignments, they're pulling from a whole bunch of pools of questions. So, like if you and your friend are both taking this together, you might get 2 completely different quizzes. And so don't expect to have the same questions, but it does all cover the same material. 3rd, and this is something that your book actually mentions when we get back to the nervous system, there are a bunch of different ways that your brain can convert a short-term memory into a long-term memory, aka learn something or remember something. Really the only way that you have control over in this class that will help you out is repetition. The story that I always give here is, I know like all the lyrics to all the 80s pop songs in my head. I can sing some Wham to you or some Go-Go's to you, and y'all probably don't even know who those bands are. I'm old, y'all. But I know those because I sat there and I sang them over and over and over and over and over again. And I sang them with my friends, and I sang them in the car, and I still do to this day. But I know the lyrics because of that, or at least I know what I sang and thought the lyrics were. I was wrong in a lot of cases, turns out. But the same thing applies here. Just reading chapter 1 one time does not mean you're going to remember what the parietal peritoneum is. But if you go over those notes over and over again, and you make yourself flashcards, and you watch numerous videos, and you talk it through with your lab instructor too, and you talk it through with your group members, the more you repeat it, the more it's going to stick in there eventually. And so just repeat it over and over again, and it really will help. Finally, not on the slide, last up, I am here to help you. Again, I know I seem horribly mean. I'm so menacing at my 5'4", unfortunately, fat little body. And so I want you to know I'm not as mean as I will seem sometimes. I am totally here to help you. If you are ever struggling with any of the material in this class, email me, call me, meet me. I don't care how you want to try to get together, if it's through Zoom or Schoology conferences, or you want to Marco Polo with me, whatever. I will do whatever I can to help you learn material when we get to some of that material that's tricky. Some of AMP is just straight up memorizing stuff. Some of it, though, is a really convoluted set of metabolic pathways that are really difficult to learn, and I can help you with those. So ask for help if you need it, and use what I give you to help you learn the material. I hope that helps you go into this class with the right mindset. Good luck.